Bugatti aren't going to sell us parts to rebuild this car, and they're not going to help us separate the car in half for sure. So I'm left with no choice but to give this a go myself. I don't have any special tools or special training, so if we manage to pull this off, it for sure will be a huge achievement.
One YouTuber, one wrecked hypercar, and a manufacturer that said it could never be fixed. For over a year, Matt Armstrong has been rebuilding a Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport that Bugatti itself declared dead. No parts, no support, no factory blessing. He built engine mounts from scratch. He sourced airbags from a hatchback.
The Audi A3 8V, whether it's RS3, S3 or A3, providing it is the 8V model, all have the exact same part number airbag.
He got roasted online for a body kit that cost more than most houses. And now, after months of silence from the one company that could actually change everything, a new name has entered the conversation: Mansory. Nobody has confirmed it. Nobody has denied it either. Let's get into it. The impossible Bugatti rebuild begins. In October 2025, a crash happened in Miami that most people scrolled past without a second thought. A Bugatti Chiron Pur Sport, one of only around 60 ever built, went into a wall hard enough to fold the front end, deploy every airbag, and crack the carbon fiber tub underneath. The car belonged to Alex Gonzalez, an American content creator known online as FX Alex G. Insurance looked at the damage, ran the numbers, and came back with a repair estimate north of $1.7 million. For a car that normally trades hands around $4 to $4.5 million, that number was enough to declare it a total loss. Gonzalez took the payout. The wreck went to auction. That should have been the end of the story. Total loss hypercars usually vanish into private collections, get parted out, or sit in a warehouse waiting for someone with more money than sense. Instead, Gonzalez bought his own car back at a steep discount, somewhere around $1.9 million, and made a decision that would define the next year of his life. He wasn't going to let it rot. He called in Matt Armstrong. If you don't know the name, Armstrong is a British content creator and former professional BMX rider who built an entire career on one simple idea: buy the car nobody else wants, and prove the experts wrong. Water-damaged Ferraris, stolen BMWs, repossessed six-figure builds. He's dragged all of them back from the scrapyard on camera, one stubborn repair at a time. But a Chiron Pur Sport is a different animal entirely. This isn't a car you can fix with parts from a breaker's yard and a bit of patience. It's a hand-built, low-volume hypercar with a carbon monocoque, a bespoke 16-cylinder engine, and a level of manufacturing complexity that very few workshops on the planet are equipped to handle. That complexity is exactly why the project mattered. Bugatti has spent 2 decades cultivating an image of total control over its own cars. Every repair, every part, every service booking running through the factory in Molsheim, France. A crashed Pur Sport, sitting in a Miami workshop with an independent mechanic and a camera crew, was never just a repair job. It was a direct test of whether that control was actually necessary.
We've got a bit more to do on this Bugatti, which is clearly in half. We did the impossible, but now it's going to get a lot harder because everything from now on is building the car and fixing it.
Or whether it was something else entirely, a business model dressed up as a safety requirement. Armstrong didn't fully grasp what he was walking into. Neither did his audience. What started as another salvage rebuild would turn into one of the most closely watched automotive sagas of the year, pulling in a car company's CEO, a very public standoff, and eventually a question nobody expected: could an outsider actually finish what the factory refused to touch? Gonzalez wasn't a stranger to risk. He'd made a name for himself buying and flipping high-end machinery long before this crash. And part of what drew him to the idea of a private rebuild was simple economics. A car worth $4 million, sitting at under $2 million after the write-off, still had enormous upside if someone could bring it back safely. The gamble wasn't really about the money, though. It was about whether anyone outside Molsheim had the skill, the patience, and the willingness to be filmed making every single mistake along the way. News of the crash spread fast in enthusiast circles long before Armstrong got involved. Photos of the mangled front clip circulated across forums and comment sections, and the usual predictions followed. Total loss, parted out, gone for good. Nobody expected the next chapter to involve a British YouTuber setting up shop in a rented Miami unit with nothing but hand tools, a lift, and a stubborn refusal to accept that dead meant dead. That refusal is the entire reason this story exists. There's also a bigger picture worth keeping in mind here. Hypercars like the Chiron Pur Sport rarely get a second chance once they're branded a total loss. Insurers write them off conservatively. Manufacturers have little incentive to help revive a car that no longer carries their liability. And most owners simply don't have the technical background to attempt a rebuild themselves, even if they wanted to. What made this project different from the start wasn't just the car. It was the combination of an owner willing to gamble, a mechanic willing to document every failure publicly, and an audience large enough to hold everyone involved accountable if corners started getting cut. The damage alone told half the story. The front end had crumpled on impact, taking out the headlights, the hood, both front wings, and the horseshoe-shaped grille that's become Bugatti's signature. Every airbag had fired. The transmission had taken a hit hard enough that reaching it would mean physically splitting the car in two. And underneath all of that visible damage sat a deeper question that wouldn't get answered for months. How far into the structure had the crash actually gone, and would piecing it back together ever be safe enough to drive? The CA who answered, a YouTuber. The first real obstacle wasn't mechanical. It was administrative, and it hit harder than any of the physical damage. Bugatti locked the car's VIN. In practice, that meant no authorized dealer anywhere in the world could sell parts for this specific chassis, no matter how much money was on the table. The factory's position was blunt. The car had been written off. Its structural integrity could no longer be guaranteed. And Bugatti wasn't willing to put its name behind a repair it hadn't performed itself. There was a technical argument behind that stance, and it wasn't nothing. Splitting the front tub from the rear drivetrain frame to access a damaged transmission is not a job most workshops can do. According to Bugatti, only a handful of facilities in the entire world were equipped for it.
And they have to split the car in half. You can't do that in a garage. There's just a few places in the world with the right equipment and only a few people in the world with the right training to be able to do that.
And none of them were in a rented unit in Miami. If the team got it wrong, the risk wasn't cosmetic. It was a multi-million-dollar hypercar with compromised structural integrity, potentially back on public roads. Then came the part nobody expected. Mate Rimac himself, the CEO now overseeing Bugatti, started weighing in publicly. He pushed back on some of the cost figures circulating online, arguing that several of the eye-watering part prices being thrown around in comment sections didn't reflect what Bugatti actually charges. He also said the door wasn't fully closed. The car could still come to Molsheim for a proper inspection and repair, on the factory's terms. What he wasn't offering was a blank check for an independent rebuild filmed for a YouTube audience. Armstrong pressed ahead anyway. Watching a CEO respond directly to a YouTube project gave the story a legitimacy most car channels never get close to, but it also raised the stakes. Every camera angle, every part number, every claim made on camera was now being fact-checked by the very company being challenged. A misstep wasn't just embarrassing. It could hand Bugatti exactly the ammunition it needed to say, publicly, that independent hypercar repair was reckless. Comment sections turned into a running debate that outlasted several video uploads. One side argued Bugatti was protecting owners from a repair that could genuinely put lives at risk if it went wrong. The other side pointed out that a company charging what it charges for maintenance has every financial incentive to keep that business locked inside its own walls, safety concerns or not. Both arguments had merit, and neither side fully backed down, which is exactly why a CEO felt the need to step into a comment section in the first place. For weeks, the standoff looked total. No parts, no support, no acknowledgement beyond Rimaac's public comments. Then something shifted. As the rebuild progressed, and Armstrong kept documenting real, verifiable engineering work instead of guesswork, Bugatti's position softened. Reports pointed to the parts blacklist being lifted and repair estimates being revised downward. A quiet admission that the numbers being quoted earlier hadn't told the full story either. That softening didn't erase the tension, though. It reframed it. What had started as a flat refusal turned into something closer to an uneasy standoff. One side proving competence with every video, the other side unwilling to fully hand over control. Bugatti never fully endorsed the project, and Armstrong never stopped documenting every gap the factory left him to fill on his own. It was détente, not partnership, and everyone watching knew the difference. That unresolved friction is exactly what set the stage for everything that came next. Because once a manufacturer admits, even quietly, that some of its own numbers didn't hold up, it opens a door that's very hard to close again. Owners were watching. Other independent specialists were watching. And the question hanging over the whole saga stopped being whether Armstrong could pull this off, and started being what it would mean for everyone else if he did. Rebuilding the impossible. With no factory parts and no factory access, Armstrong's team had one option left: build almost everything themselves. That decision turned the project from a repair into something closer to reverse engineering an entire hypercar from first principles. The transmission was the first real test. Reaching it meant separating the front tub from the rear drivetrain frame. The exact procedure Bugatti had said only a couple of facilities on Earth could safely perform. The team did it anyway, working bolt by bolt through a modular design never meant to be opened outside a factory floor. When the two halves finally came apart, they found worse news underneath: a shattered cast aluminum engine mount support.
But rather than the engine mounts breaking, the actual cast aluminium is broke. And it looks like if we're going to try and remove that part, we're going to have to separate the gearbox from the engine.
Along with a pinched coolant line and the kind of hidden secondary damage that only shows up once you're actually inside the car. From there, it became a game of substitution and fabrication. The Chiron's original airbags were unavailable through any official channel, so the team sourced replacements from an unlikely donor: a Volkswagen Group hatchback, an Audi A3, of all things, chosen because the mounting and specifications lined up close enough to work. The Pur Sport runs 10 separate radiators to manage the cooling demands of a 16-cylinder engine, and several of them had been destroyed in the crash. Rather than wait on a factory that wasn't selling, the team had custom units built from scratch. A specialist shop called Valvetronic stepped in to fabricate a bespoke exhaust system, since the original was long gone and no replacement existed off a shelf anywhere. Some of the discoveries along the way were almost comic against the backdrop of a multi-million-dollar hypercar. The accelerator pedal, it turned out, was just molded plastic rather than machined billet aluminum, a small detail that undercut some of the mystique around what you're actually paying for in a car like this. Viewers who spotted hairline marks on the underside during one video briefly feared a structural crack. It turned out to be nothing more than leftover dirt from the workshop floor. But the moment showed just how closely this build was being scrutinized, frame by frame, by an audience that had grown personally invested in the outcome. None of this happened quickly. Months passed between the initial teardown and the day the engine finally caught. There were setbacks the cameras barely had time to process before the next problem surfaced. A part that didn't fit on the first try, a supplier who couldn't deliver on schedule, a wiring issue that took days to trace. The grind rarely made for dramatic thumbnails, but it's exactly what separated this build from the kind of quick, cosmetic flip that gets a car back on the road looking right while hiding what's wrong underneath. Every hour logged was documented, time-stamped and uploaded, which meant there was nowhere to cut corners, even if the team had wanted to. The transmission split alone deserves more credit than it usually gets. Bugatti had suggested this level of work belonged strictly inside a factory environment, performed by technicians trained specifically on that platform. Watching an independent crew work through the same procedure with off-the-shelf tools and careful documentation didn't just move the rebuild forward. It quietly undercut one of the central arguments for why owners should never attempt this kind of work outside official channels in the first place. Piece by piece, the car started coming back together. Front and rear sections were reunited.
We can start fitting the rest of the parts which attach to this rear frame.
And bolted into one structure again. The custom exhaust was fitted. And then came the moment the entire project had been building toward. The engine turned over, caught, and ran. It wasn't a finished car by any stretch. There was trim missing, bodywork still absent, and a long list of smaller jobs left to close out. But it was alive, running under its own power for the first time since the crash, built almost entirely from improvisation, donor parts, and stubbornness. That moment should have been the emotional high point of the whole saga. In a lot of ways, it was. But it also created a new problem nobody had fully planned for. The car ran. It didn't look like a Bugatti anymore, not really, because without factory panels, putting a body back on it meant figuring out an entirely different set of parts, and that decision was about to become the most controversial part of the entire build. The body kit that split the internet. With no way to source the Chiron's original body panels, Armstrong's team made a call that split the audience right down the middle. Build a custom exterior from the ground up, one that wasn't trying to be a factory-correct Bugatti anymore, but something new entirely. The result was a bespoke, aggressively styled body kit reported to have cost somewhere in the region of $700,000. A figure that on its own tells you how far this project had drifted from a simple insurance repair. The reveal didn't land the way the team hoped. Almost immediately, comment sections filled with criticism over the proportions, the design language, and how far it strayed from the clean lines the Chiron is known for. Some viewers called it a genuine engineering achievement given the circumstances, a one-of-one solution to a problem the factory had refused to help solve. Others weren't as generous, arguing the styling didn't do justice to a car this rare, and that the project had wandered from restoration into something closer to a completely different vehicle wearing a Bugatti badge. Underneath the design debate sat a more interesting argument, one that mattered a lot more than whether the panel gaps looked right on camera. If a manufacturer refuses to sell parts, what's an owner actually supposed to do? Let a multi-million-dollar car rot in storage forever? Ship it overseas to a market with looser rules? Or build something new, imperfect, and unofficial just to get it back on the road at all? Armstrong's team chose the third option, and the backlash it triggered wasn't really about aesthetics. It was a public referendum, on what happens when the only path to keeping a car alive runs straight through improvisation. Other custom coach builders have made careers out of exactly this kind of transformation, taking a factory car and turning it into something the original engineers never signed off on. Usually that work happens by choice, a wealthy owner wanting something louder or more aggressive than what left the factory floor. This was different. Nobody involved was chasing a statement piece. They were solving a supply problem the hard way, and the finished shape carried every compromise that process forced on it. Some viewers understood that distinction immediately. Others judged the result against cars that were never built under the same constraints. And the comparison was never going to be fair. There's a version of this story where the body kit becomes the final chapter. A flawed but functional ending to a year-long saga. The car back on the road looking nothing like it used to. Case closed. For a while, that's exactly where things seemed to be heading. The rebuild was mechanically sound. The car could move under its own power. And the only unresolved question was whether people would ever fully accept how it looked. Even the harshest critics in the comments rarely argued the car should have stayed dead. The disagreement was narrower than that, and in some ways more honest. Not whether Armstrong should have saved it, but whether what came out the other side still deserved to be called a Bugatti at all, or whether it had quietly become something new wearing familiar badges. That's not a question with a clean answer, and the project never pretended to have one. It simply kept moving forward, one panel at a time, while the debate played out underneath it. Then the story took a turn nobody was expecting, and it came from an entirely different direction than anyone had been watching. Is Mansory about to join the Armstrong revolution? Over the past few weeks, a new name has started showing up alongside Armstrong's in headlines across automotive YouTube: Mansory. If you're not familiar, Mansory is a German coach builder that spent decades doing exactly what its name represents, taking factory hypercars and transforming them into fully bespoke creations.
Today we're about to go to one of the most luxurious showrooms in the world, Mansory. Now I'm sure you guys have heard this name before because they make some of the most expensive vehicles for the world's elite.
Wrapped in custom carbon fiber, built for an ownership base that includes some of the wealthiest collectors on Earth. They don't operate inside any manufacturer's authorized network. They never have. That's the entire point of what they do. Several creators covering the Armstrong saga have started framing a potential collaboration between the two as the next chapter, and it's easy to see why the idea has traction. Mansory brings exactly what this project has been missing from day one: manufacturing capability, design infrastructure, and decades of experience building outside factory control without cutting corners on quality. Pair that with Armstrong's documented, camera-verified rebuild work, and the audience he's built around it, and you have the outline of something bigger than one car. A genuine alternative pathway for hypercar owners who hit the same wall Gonzalez did. It's worth being straight about where things actually stand, though. As of this video, there's no official statement from either side confirming a formal partnership. What exists is a wave of speculation, some of it from creators with real access to this story, some of it clearly just chasing the algorithm with a dramatic headline. That distinction matters. The gap between "these two are talking" and "these two have signed a partnership that changes the entire hypercar repair industry."
Mansory, the home of customization on high-end cars for high-value individuals.
Did you do a good job?
Who?
Matt.
He.
Is enormous. And right now, nobody outside a very small circle actually knows which one is true. It also matters who Mansory actually is, before anyone gets carried away with what this could mean. This isn't a backyard tuning shop chasing viral attention. It's a company with 30 years of history, serving an ownership base most of us will never come close to, working on cars most workshops never touch. Their reputation was built on discretion as much as craftsmanship, which makes the current wave of public speculation a little unusual in itself. Companies like this don't typically end up trending on car YouTube. The fact that they're being mentioned at all says something about how far this story has traveled beyond its original audience. What makes the rumor worth taking seriously is the timing. Independent right-to-repair conversations have been gaining real momentum, with owners and specialists pushing back on the idea that only the original manufacturer can be trusted with maintenance and repair. A rebuild like this one, filmed start to finish, mistakes included, parts sourced and fabricated in full view of the camera, is exactly the kind of evidence that argument has been missing. If a builder with Mansory's reputation did formalize something with Armstrong, it wouldn't just affect one crashed Chiron. It would hand other owners a genuine second option the next time a factory says no.
But we just don't think it's safe, and that's why we can't support it.
There's a reason this particular rumor caught fire in a way earlier ones didn't. Hundreds of Chirons and Veyrons exist worldwide, and every one of them will eventually need major work outside routine servicing. Right now, most of those owners have exactly one option: if a factory refuses the way it refused Gonzalez. Accept the answer, or find their own version of what Armstrong has spent a year building from scratch. A credible partnership wouldn't need to touch every hypercar on the road to matter. It would just need to exist as a real, proven alternative. And that alone would shift the leverage every owner has the next time a manufacturer says no. For now, that's still an if. What's confirmed is a year of real engineering work. A public standoff with one of the most controlling manufacturers in the industry. A body kit that split opinion down the middle. And a car running again against every expectation set for it back in October 2025.
Oh, she's driving good. Oh, it's so smooth.
Whether Mansory becomes the next chapter or just a headline that faded by next month, the bigger story isn't really about one coach builder or one YouTuber. It's about what happens to an entire industry once someone proves, on camera, with receipts, that the factory was never the only option. So where does that leave us? A car Bugatti called dead is running again. A CEO who tried to shut this down ended up quietly backing off his own numbers. A body kit that split an entire fan base down the middle. And now, one of the most respected names in coach building might be circling the next chapter, though nobody's confirmed a thing yet. That's the real story here. Not a leaked memo, not a secret meeting, just an owner, a mechanic, and a year of receipts proving the factory was never the only option. If Mansory's name does end up on this car, you'll see it here first. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and let's see what happens next.